Hey guys, G54023. Got another gun on the gun bench today. It's a Springfield XD 9mm. It's the original XD, and we're going to do a trigger comparison. The original versus the Powder River Precision XD trigger kit. This comes highly recommended by some of the guys I shoot competition with for their XDs, and apparently it's a pretty good upgrade. It comes in at $100 plus, so I'm not really sure how much this one costs. This is a customer's trigger. So what I wanted to do was do a comparison between the original and the Powder River Precision kit and kind of show you the results of it, and you can kind of gauge whether it's worth the money or not. So the original trigger, go ahead and show you this has been safety checked, no magazine, nothing in the gun. The original trigger is a little bit spongy. It's got quite a bit of pre-travel, as you can see, and then kind of a spongy feel, and then a pretty positive snap. But as with anything, it can be upgraded, it can be improved. So I'm going to show you what the stock trigger is pulling with the trigger gauge. And it's right around 6 pounds now, and this particular gun has had a couple of thousand rounds through it. I know, because I know the person who owns this gun, and I shoot with him quite often, so I know it's got thousands of rounds through it. So this is pretty broke in, and there's about 5.5. We'll kind of get an average here. It just keeps getting lighter every pull. So I would say it's safe to say 5 to 5.5 pounds. There's about 5.5, a little over 5.5. So 5 to 5.5 pounds. It's not too bad, but it's just a little spongy. It's got quite a bit of pre-travel, a little bit of over-travel. Let's see if we can't improve that with the Powder River Precision kit. Okay guys, before we take this thing down, I have to go through my little safety spiel. So if you don't know what you're doing when it comes to working on the firing mechanism or any other part of a firearm, take it to a gunsmith that does know how the system works and what kind of tolerances that need to be kept intact to keep the gun safe. If you remove too much material on anything or modify any kind of internal parts, it could modify something else inside. And if you're not aware of that, it can make your gun unsafe. So with that being said, this is not a tutorial of how to do this. It's not recommending you do it. It's just showing the results of what I've got after I've done it. So take that for what it's worth, and please don't modify your firearms to be unsafe. Okay guys, XD is fairly simple to take apart. We're going to go ahead and safety check it again. No magazine, nothing in the chamber. With the slide lock back, we're going to rotate this takedown lever up, ease the slide forward, and point it in a safe direction, engage the grip safety, and pull the trigger. The slide will then come off. You can set the slide off to the side. Then we are going to put the takedown lever in about the 11 to 10 o'clock position and just pull out. Just like that. And we can rotate and pull out, and it'll pop right out. We're just trying to get that past that detent. Next thing, we'll pop these pins out. Let's take a punch and get them started. Okay, then we'll push them out. You might have to get a roll of tape or a bench block or something to get these the rest of the way out. But this particular gun, I can just pull them out. So you can leave them in there if you so desire. There's a small spring detent in there that holds them in, but you can drive them out. Okay, once you drive out your trigger pin, your slide stop will come out, and you can lift your locking block out. Be sure to not lose this spring. This is your detent spring for your takedown lever, and it's also your spring for your slide stop. Okay, once that's out, the trigger will simply just lift out like so. Set that to the side, and then there's a small pin right here. This is your sear pin. Everything in here rides on this single pin. We'll push it out. You want to keep your finger over top of the sear and everything, because this spring right here, if you don't do that, it has a tendency to fly into orbit. Also, keep the magazine well flat on the table, because once it does come out, it'll hit your finger and fly right down into the mag well. It'll be easy to get. So we'll push this pin out, and it should just fall right out. Pull that out, and you hear that spring fall out, and once you lift the gun, it's right there. Easy way to keep track of it. Okay, now that you've done that, you can depress your grip safety and kind of just tap it on the table, and your sear and disconnector should just fall out the bottom. Okay, sear and disconnector's out. There's still one more little pin holding your ejector in. As you can see right there. You can take a small screwdriver and go into this little gap and push it outward, just like that, and then pull it out. Alright, the frame's completely stripped down to where we need to, so let's get to work on this thing. Okay, once you have your trigger out and everything, trigger bar comes off the trigger shoe pretty easy. Just rotate it up to get it away from the leg of this spring and pull it out. And your spring should fall out, and we'll set our old trigger to the side. Hey guys, this kit does require quite a bit of fitting. It's kind of a tedious process if you want to get it right, if you want to get the maximum potential out of this trigger. You do not want to try and remove a lot of material all at once, because you will mess up your gun if you try to do so. Take it slow, and it's going to require you to put the gun together and take it back apart multiple times. I've had this thing apart probably a good 7 or 8 times before I really felt like I got it right. So with that being said, there's 2 major parts that you have to fit with this kit. One is the bottom of the sear. You have to remove a small amount of material, a very small amount of material, from the bottom of the sear to get the beaver tail safety to slip under. This particular one, I had to remove just a couple thousandths, but you want to make sure that your grip safety is intact, so it does work. So that's one part. Another part is a small pad right here on your disconnector. This is what controls your trigger reset, and the way it does that is your trigger bar actually hooks around the back of this thing, and when you pull the trigger, your trigger bar travels forward and rotates the sear out of engagement with the striker, rotates it down, and once the gun fires, the slide comes back, it hits this pad, bumps this down, and lets that sit right there underneath of that pad. And when you release the trigger, this travels rearward and it snaps back up like that, and that's the click you feel and hear when the trigger resets. And when you pull it again, the gun goes off, bang, slide reciprocates, puts that back under that pad, and the process starts over again. Release the trigger, and it clicks back. And you have to remove material from this part right here. You can see some of my stoning marks here. I didn't have to take off a whole lot of material, but you know, I did it in very, very small steps so that I wouldn't go too far. You never want to go too far. You can always remove material, but it's really hard to put it back. So take baby steps and get it right. Another thing that I did modify a spring. I modified the trigger return spring. I had to kind of bend this over just a little bit. I just took a pair of small needle nose and bent it over ever so slightly because this was rubbing on the bottom of the locking block here, right around in here. So I wanted to eliminate that. Also, this particular spring, the leg right here was just a little bit too long, and it was catching on the bottom of the locking block here also. So I had to snip just a small portion of this leg off because I was getting it wasn't resetting correctly. It was catching on something, and it took me a little while to figure that out. I finally found where it was catching. Took a lot of inspecting, but if you're having that problem, it's not with your disconnector. It may be with your trigger spring, that leg being just a little bit too long. So that's the problems that I ran into on this particular gun. You may not run into that problem, but just a data point for you to be aware of. I also polished the trigger bar here. I polished all these parts. As you can see, I've polished the engagement surface with the striker. On the sear, I polished as best I could on this disconnector on both sides. I polished the engagement surface where it rubs up against the disconnector on the sear. Right here, there's a small raised area, and you may have to remove a little material here too. If everything's fitting really tightly together and not moving freely, you may have to take a little bit off of this pad here. I didn't really have to take anything off, I just polished it. I also polished the other side here. I don't really believe you have to do that, but I do it anyway. If there's anything that rubs against each other, this ejector sits on this side of the sear and it rubs against it on this small little surface here, so I went ahead and hit that also. I also polished the sear pin so that the sear and everything hangs on it and it moves freely. It doesn't catch or bind up on the pin. Anything that you can do to remove friction from anything is going to help your trigger pull immensely. So polish your trigger bar, the top of your trigger bar, and especially this hook right here that engages your disconnector. Okay, so we'll put this all back together and we'll see what kind of trigger we get. I can already tell you it's a lot better than stock. So let's put this thing back together. First thing we're going to do is we're going to put our sear and our disconnector and everything back in. So we'll grab our sear pin and start it into the hole and put it in just about that far so that we can get our disconnector put in. This is our disconnector. You see it's a lot smaller than the original. This is going to go in just like this with this tab facing toward the outside of the gun. So we're just going to drop it in here and it's going to set just like that. Okay, then we'll take our pin and push it in just ever so slightly more. We'll take our sear. It fits in just like that, with this little leg sticking toward the right side of the gun as you're looking down the sights. So we'll drop that into place you're going to want to depress your grip safety to get it out of the way, and drop that right in and try to get it to start on that pin. Okay, push that in. If you go too far, just reach in with a punch and push it back out, because we're going to have to get this new sear spring back in. The sear spring fits in just like that, and it just cradles down into the sear like so, one leg pointed down, one leg pointed up. Put that in and push it through. Okay, don't go through the other side yet, because we still have one more thing to put in, and that would be our ejector. So we need to slide this into place and go ahead and put slight pressure on your pin and kind of work it until it goes through that hole, and it fits in just like that, small end pointed forward. Now we have this other little pin on the other side. You need to rotate this up, and there's a small hole in the side of your ejector that will fit in, and we can push that through, but not all the way yet. We'll push it in about that far, just so we can get the leg of this spring underneath of that pin. I found it's easy to use a set of tweezers or a set of needle nose pliers and just hold the jaws together and kind of trap the spring in that little groove and just work it under that spring, or under that pin, just like that, so that we put spring tension on our sear. And go ahead and push all these pins flush with these slide rails, so that the pin is not sticking past the slide rails, and your slide will ride in there nice and easy. Okay, now we've got all that reassembled. We'll take our trigger bar, and our trigger spring, and this is our new trigger that we've fitted the over travel with. We'll hold this there, try to hold it in place with the straight end on the bottom and the curved end on the top. We'll take our trigger bar pin and slide it through the trigger shoe and through the spring itself, just like that. Okay, and this little hook will hook around the outside of your trigger bar, just like that. Okay, then we'll take our trigger bar and we'll put it into this little empty area back here next to the disconnector. It'll kind of just slide back in there, and we'll pivot our trigger down through the trigger hole in the frame, and we'll kind of have to hold it up ever so slightly, I've noticed, like so. Take your locking block and your spring, your detent spring, hold it in place, and you kind of have to rock it in like so, keeping the locking block on the outside of the trigger bar, and it'll just drop into place like so. Now we can put our trigger pin in. We'll start it. We'll tap it into place, get it started. We're going to have to pull the trigger back just a little bit, look through the hole on the other side, and kind of line it up. And drive it through. Now we should have a trigger that pivots and returns. Okay, don't drive it all the way through yet, because we still have to put our slide stop back in. You also, I don't know if you can see it or not, but your detent spring sits in there. If you drive that pin in a little too far, just drive it back out and make sure that it's up toward the top of the gun. I like to hold it upside down so that it stays in place, and just put your slide stop into the groove where it fits, and you'll see it go into place through the trigger pinhole. Kind of line it up the best you can, and you can usually just push it through with finger pressure, but you're going to have to tap the pin into place, and then make sure that you have spring tension on your slide stop. Okay, so we'll go ahead and push this all the way to the detent, like so. It should be below flush on both sides. Okay, now we can take our other locking block pin and put it in. Okay, and put it to the detent. Should be below flush on either side. We'll put in our takedown lever. What I like to do is I like to utilize this little shelf here. Just stick it in until it stops on that detent spring, and then just rotate it, and it should overcome that spring and let you push it the rest of the way in, like so. Rotate it to the down position to where it will fit into the hole on the other side, and just rotate it back up, like so, and put inward pressure, and it should catch the detent, and then detent up and detent down. It should not move freely. Okay, there should be a noticeable detent there. Alright, now that that's back together, we can put our takedown lever up, slide our slide on, lock it to the rear, put our takedown lever down, ease the slide forward. And if you haven't fit everything yet, check your trigger. If your trigger does not fire, then you obviously have to have more taken off of your over travel, or check your safety and all that other stuff. Powder River Precision has a great video on their YouTube page. Just look it up. They'll show you how to do everything. But that's how you get it back together. Okay, after you've got your pistol all put back together and you feel that it's ready to go, you want to do multiple safety checks. Make sure that your grip safety is working properly. If it doesn't come all the way out, or if the trigger is able to fire the gun without it being depressed, then it's an unsafe gun. You have to be able to fire the gun only when the grip safety is depressed. Okay? Another thing, you want to check your reset. You make sure your trigger is resetting properly. So fire, cycle the gun with the trigger trap to the rear, and let out slowly. There should be no grinding or catching or anything. You can hear the click and feel it in your finger, and then press. Do that again. Click, there's reset, and the gun fires. Another thing that you do have to fit is this over travel stop. Probably the easiest way that I've found to do it is to cut a strip of sandpaper, whatever grit that you desire. And if you want to take it off fast, obviously a lower grit is going to remove it faster. So just be careful not to remove too much. So make sure your gun's cocked. This particular one, let's see if I can get a little bit better light here. This particular one goes to about right here, starts to get a little harder to pull, and then bang, no over travel. You want to basically get this trigger to where you have to pull it a little bit harder to get the trigger to fall and take just a smidge more off. So you want it to come to the wall. There's still a little bit of sponginess, but I think that's the inherence of the trigger system in the XDs. So there's a little bit of spongy, but then it breaks pretty clean. Okay. So the XDs have a convenient window that you can look through the back plate and you can see your sear and striker engagement. If I can get the light down there. There we go. You can actually see it, so you can watch what happens. And pull the trigger, you can see the sear rotate down. Then we cock the gun, and you can see that the striker is caught by the sear. We'll go ahead and depress the grip safety, and you can watch it fall out of engagement with the striker. And the striker goes forward. You want to make sure when you're fitting this grip safety that sear, unless you depress the grip safety, that sear should not move at all. There's only a couple thousandths of sear engagement in these XDs, especially with this kit. So you do not want it to fire unless you depress that grip safety. Can't stress that enough, guys. You have to make sure your firearm's safe. Okay, let's go ahead and get a trigger pull on this guy and double check there's nothing in the gun. Depress that grip safety, and we'll get a 3 pull average. It's a little over 4 1/4. A little over 4 1/4 again. Just a little under 4 1/4. So I think it'd be safe to say this kit gives you right around a 4-pound trigger, give or take the gun. What you do to it, like I said, I did polish parts and make that modification to the spring. I don't know if that made any difference or not. I don't think it would. But this trigger does feel much better than the stock trigger. There's a little less take up and 0 over travel. You can see a little bit of take up, there's a little bit of a resistance, a little bit of movement, and then break, and no over travel. Reset is much shorter. Right there. It's very, very nice compared to the stock. And we took out about 1.5 pounds. So is it worth its $100 plus price tag? Well, you be the judge. But it does feel substantially better than the stock XD trigger. So with that being said, have fun, be safe, guys, live in yellow. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to put them down below and I'll get to them as soon as I can. Try to keep it civil. Thanks for watching.